So I'm Graeme, I work at Havas People, and today we're going to talk about content marketing in recruitment. And in preparation for this, I read the Wikipedia definition of content marketing, and I thought it was very interesting. So I'm going to start off with just reading that. Content marketing is a strategic marketing approach focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience and ultimately to drive profitable customer action. That's amazing. It's doing an awful lot of stuff there. And I think just in reading that, it raised a lot of questions in my mind. For example, that could apply to almost any advertising. Surely isn't that just the purpose of advertising? I mean, how do you ensure content is valuable in itself? How do you go about creating this content, and how do you ensure that the people that it's in front of actually want to engage with it? How do you define your audience? And I suppose in particular, why is it relevant to recruitment in particular? And to answer these questions and many more, we have a panel. We have over here, we have Chris from National Offender Management Service. And we also have Stephanie from the same service. We have our own Chris, social media from Havas. We have Nino, Programmatic from Havas People. And we have Paul working for the student room, also on the programmatic side. So we've got quite a range of views and opinions. And so the idea today is we're going to start off with a couple of questions that we have here, but hopefully you'll have questions yourself and that will drive the whole thing forward. Otherwise, I have got a lot of questions I've listed down here. We'll be okay either way. And I think that the starting point for me was, I've read my definition, the Wikipedia definition of content management, but I think that it's quite fluid in terms of what people think about it and why they think it's useful. So I thought I'd start by going around the panel and asking that question: how do you define content management, and why do you think it's important for what you do?
Yeah. So I think for us it was actually getting a message out. It's a very closed world prison. I think we've got a video that you're going to see in a few moments, and nobody actually wants to look in. And I think what it's allowed us to do is actually put material out there that actually starts people asking questions about what it's like to work in that environment. So it's not about apply to be an officer, a prison officer. It's about what's it like inside a prison. And I think it's pushing out that content that's made all the difference.
Yeah, exactly. And for us, it's all about owning that narrative of what it is like to work inside of a prison. So a lot of people have ideas about what it might be like, and I think we've got a video to show of people's main perception of it. So there's no sound, but obviously we've got offenders jumping around in between kind of chaos. This is something that was on BBC News. Got drugs being brought into the prison. So it doesn't take you long to see that what people think about prisons is that they're unsafe, they're dirty, drugs are being brought in, there's loads of violence. And for us, it's about telling a different story, and content marketing allows us to do that. It allows us to show that actually this is exceptional, this isn't everyday. Our campaign has very much been hinged on the phrase, is it in you to be a prison officer? But if this is your only perception of what being a prison officer is, it's up to us to say, actually, what is that it, and what are we looking for? And content marketing lets us do that.
I think the other beauty of that, and I think we have the sound, because the thing that's unique about working in a prison environment that you can't get over is that noise. It's the constant clanging of gates, the shouting, the banging, and it's about being able to show to people in a controlled way through the use of media that actually that's the environment that we work in. The one bit that you'll never be able to do through sort of media content is the smell, which thankfully
we're working. Yeah. I think if you think about the campaign, is it in you to be a prison officer? there's a very fundamental question that I think open up a lot of avenues for content. So looking beyond just the job vacancy and actually going on, okay, what kind of skills you need. Fitness, for example, that's the first thing you do when you get to an assessment centre. It's a fitness test. If you don't pass a fitness test, you don't get through to the next stage. So actually giving content around fitness advice is really important. That played a big role in this. My view on content marketing, I think, is that actually I think it's a big answer to a big challenge, which is you look at the global recruiting trends 2016 from LinkedIn. 36% of people are passive job seekers. 66% of people don't actually, they know about a job before they actually see the job vacancy. So there's a lot of things that need to be done before that, before you actually show a job vacancy to somebody. So actually, you need to really cater for the passive job seeker. Because if only 36% of people, for example, on LinkedIn regard themselves as active job seekers, then actually you've got to do a lot from a passive perspective to actually convince those people to do it. And when you look at the consumer world, there's so much going on in terms of content marketing. It's a well-used phrase. And I think when you look at what they're doing, I mean, for example, the spend is going up ridiculously. So on Campaign magazine, they said recently that by 2020, UK content marketing spend will double. So 2014, that was £125 million. That's going to be going up to £349 million by 2020. I think 2020 is like, oh, that's quite a way away, but actually it's not, because it's under 4 years away. So there's a lot going on within the consumer world in terms of content marketing. And you look at Marriott hotels, they sell hotel rooms, but actually what they've done is they've gone, we want to be a publisher, we want to behave like a publisher, and what they've said is we want to be the place where people can get advice and information on travelling, and be one of those go-to destinations for that. If you're in Waitrose, you'll see the Waitrose Weekend newspaper. That's a perfect form of content marketing. Actually, yes, they do want to sell their products, but they're giving advice, giving insights, and giving entertaining content through this magazine, through this newspaper, and that encourages people to then buy products. But they're not focusing on purely the selling of a product. So in this case, if you focus purely on the selling of a job vacancy, you're only going to get so far.
Yeah, that's a great point in terms of what's the future of content marketing recruitment. Well, what's the newest future? Well, that should be the newest future, should be the present. A lot of companies are not really marketing themselves, are not really sharing what their values are and what they're standing for. It's almost like, if you think about the way that we behave as humans, we end up with friends that kind of similar to us, we kind of share the same values. And that's because our friends, the people around us, kind of know what we're standing for. And I think that's very important when it comes to hiring someone, because then by letting the candidates in the world say, who you are, what you stand for, then you kind of screen whoever doesn't really agree with what you stand for. So actually you cut costs as well when it comes to hiring and firing, because you may hire the wrong person and then you have to go through the process of like, actually we don't really match. So I think the nearest future should definitely be the present. In my mind, the very far away, we sort of have what was that movie? Minority Report style of things where personalization kind of blends into content marketing as well.
A personalization point is actually really interesting. But as far as sort of content marketing is concerned, I'd probably argue that it isn't really that new. I'd probably say that sort of the first sort of printing press that tuned out the first newspaper, someone probably paid a couple of shillings to have some sort of branded content or sponsored article or native content within that. Where it has changed is that the level of data we're able to gather, particularly in the online space, that can be used, that can be leveraged to just deploy content far more effectively than it has been done in the past. Advertorials have existed for a very long time. Just historically, they've been very scattergun. But now, with the likes of sort of BuzzFeed, if any of you subscribe to the Ad Exchanger, there's a really interesting blog post that came out today from the CRO of BuzzFeed on sort of how they use content and how they monetize content. well worth a read. But yeah, it's not really that new. You just have sort of lots and lots of data that can start making it much more effective, and that's the bit that sort of people need to start leveraging. But as far as sort of its importance is concerned, I think Steffi, you made a really interesting point around challenging misconceptions and preconceptions. At the student room, we have a quite established partnership with the National Apprenticeship Service, and it's well recognised in the market that there's quite a lot of misconceptions around apprenticeships and how they're perceived. Notably, we had some research recently we did with a couple of partners. Some things that came out of it is that there's still a perception it's very blue collar, still a perception it's pretty much solely for men. And these kind of misconceptions or preconceptions, they can't be influenced by a job posting. A web banner isn't going to fix that issue. It's long-term content with a long-term aim, and it takes quite a lot of boldness and bravery to do that. To think we're going to invest pounds here, which probably isn't going to yield us a candidate maybe 2 years, and that's sort of more highlighted in probably difficult to reach areas, particularly if you think of women in STEM, challenges there, BME candidates, lots and lots of investment needs to go far earlier down the recruitment funnel, and you pretty much only do that through content. A job posting just isn't going to crack it.
I think actually that's apprenticeship is a really good example. And I think also graduates is this thing of, well, there are some big decisions you make at that stage in your life. And actually, you could argue that actually any career decision you make, whether it's the beginning, middle or near the end, are very important. So, especially for apprenticeships, there's lots of questions that need to be asked. And so therefore you need to see the skills of graduates coming in and the employability skills, but actually there's a responsibility for recruiters to actually help those people. So even if you're the best talent around and if you're wanting to, you know what you're looking for, you still need help throughout the process. So it's a bit like with moms, helping people through the recruitment process. This is advice on the assessment centre. This is advice on the fitness element of the recruitment process.
And managing their expectations through that as well. So it's a long process. So actually selling that out right early on just keeps people engaged.
That's something I think Barclays did particularly well with their Learning to Code scheme, aimed at sort of 6 to 10-year-olds, which is just a fantastic piece of sort of content marketing, because on a brand and probably a recruitment perspective, but that isn't going to pay any yield for them for 6 to 10 years until those people can start considering having bank accounts.
Yeah.
However, each of those individuals have a very positive brand perception of Barclays, anyone who took part in that Code Academy. And that's the strength of content, is that you can create kind of almost a one-to-one dialogue with a particular user. There was a report, I think, in Personnel Today a couple of months back from, I think, the EMEA resource for IBM, particularly talking about millennials, and one of the key things they like in the recruitment process is to be sort of constantly to have constant dialogue with a brand before they decide to apply. And once again, that's something that you can only really get through content, being actively involved, whether it's on social platforms, your own CRM systems, which I think is a great source of content marketing, and what you said about personalization. How you can personalize your CRM process to make it that if you're an early in careers person, you see certain bits of content. If you're a senior hire, you see something completely different. You might see about share price, for example, because that's what you care about. While if you're far earlier on in that journey, you possibly want to know a lot more about development opportunities. So content doesn't have to be paid for. I think there's a lot you can do through your CRM systems as well.
And I think, you just mentioned content marketing is new, and I just want to disagree with that. Because the word is new, probably the word is definitely new, but it's always been there, really. I was thinking what we were talking about McDonald's, not because I want McDonald's now, but because I remember when I was younger, McDonald's was all about going there and buying chips and burgers and eating as much as you could. And then at some point McDonald's went down. I think it was around the 90s, 1997, 8, and there was a massive change, a massive shift from being the kind of fast food to actually being quite healthy. And what they did is actually they had a massive advertising campaign showing that well, we actually sort of are green. We will sell you salads, we sell you this, we sell you that. But that was content marketing as well, because they actually rebranded themselves. They talked about the values, the new values. They actually realized that their old values were not really matching the world anymore. So I think it's always been there. And kind of to answer some of the questions that may arise, will it be there? Well, if it's not there, then advertising is not there.
Well, let me pick you up on some of the points that you made there. One of the things you've been talking about is paid and unpaid content marketing. And if you think of advertising, isn't that just paid content marketing? What I want to understand here is, what do you see the difference between paid and unpaid content marketing?
I think there's the line isn't there anymore. I mean, I think you have this thing about organic reach, but you need to make sure the right people see it in the first place. There's like a EY, the Get Future Ready website. We've got blogs, videos from entrepreneurs talking about things like commerciality, networking. It's a great video on there. It's only had 157 views. It's great content. Okay, we need to make sure that actually the right people see that. That's only kind of part of the challenge is creating it. So I think sometimes there's this attitude of like, right, we've done the content, thank goodness for that. Job's done, and actually there's absolutely no point doing that in the first place unless you make sure the right people see that content. And yes, absolutely through CRMs, you absolutely use your existing links with people, your existing routes to market, but you can end up saturating those routes, and you need to find new audiences.
It's like if great bands like Beatles or The Queen would write all their songs, they would write all the CDs, and then we go to their mum, their grandpas, their grandmas, hey, listen to this song, but the world wouldn't listen to it, you know. It'll be like, well, you've done great music, but you need to get people to listen to it. And I think that's kind of the difference between organic and paid. So you have to come with amazing content. That's not something that we can argue about. It has to be compelling, it has to be about who you are and what are your values. But then you need to tell people about it, because if you don't tell people about it, then no one would know about it. But I would go a step further. You need to tell the right people about it, not just anyone.
It kind of reminds me of a couple of years back where everyone sort of disassociated mobile advertising from just advertising, or social media marketing from just marketing. Content marketing is just part of your overall brand strategy. It's a pillar. It's something that sort of needs to be worked and invested on, but it's just part of brand marketing on the paid side of things. On the non-paid, there's lots that can be done. Whether to touch on CRM, particularly through social. I think Lost Boys, the ad agency, creative agency, did a great campaign a couple of years back on Tinder, where it's just simply matched up on obviously what people like. Not that it was Tinder, married. Promise. But it's clearly sort of aimed at people who were sort of interested in the creative industries, and it was just simply sort of an empty chair that you could sort of swipe left or right on. That didn't cost anything, apart from sort of having sort of a good creative to come up with that concept, and someone to take a picture of an empty chair and stick it up on Tinder. Done. And it was just a really, really nice sort of ad campaign. That didn't cost anything, but that's content marketing. On the paid side of things, my perception of it is it's just part of your overall brand strategy, and it's just, we were discussing this earlier about sort of like the pillar of or the funnel of how you put people through. So job boards, and they'll always have a place in my view. They sit at the very bottom. That's kind of your click to buy, your intent to purchase. That's the very, very bottom of the funnel. But the brand piece, and that includes content marketing, that sits at the very top, and that's the bit that challenges perceptions, gets people sort of to have a warm, fuzzy feeling about a brand or a recruiter, that when you sort of get to that job board where there's lots and lots of potential opportunities over there, you think that's the one for me, that's who I want to go for, because you have an affinity for that brand from great content and great brand exposure.
We were saying that it's almost like attributing the success of Coca-Cola to the supermarkets that sell it.
Yeah.
Oh well, thanks that you're selling it, so it's all due to you, not actually. It's all due to the fact that Coca-Cola spends millions and billions in advertising and kind of getting their brand out there. So that when you go to the supermarket and you see Coca-Cola, you're like, oh yeah, that's it. I've seen that ad before.
Well, they own Christmas. That's pretty much the best content marketing kit. So,
I mean, I think for us, we had a post on Facebook last year, around November the 11th, so a remembrance ceremony that took place at our college, and that was just posted there.
Yeah.
But I think it generated the most level of engagement, because it obviously just resonated with the target group that we were involved with. So that sort of, linked to uniformed services, linked to sort of, working for the government, a national organisation. And that was, I think that's one of our best posts.
Yep.
And there's a lot of engagement that comes not just from applicants, but from people who already work for the prison service, and that's where you get the really authentic interactions, especially on Facebook. So, I mean, there can be people saying, oh, this is too challenging of a job, I wouldn't like it, and then you've got actual employees who we haven't asked to post on our behalf or anything, are just going on there and saying, actually, you just need to give it a try, like, these are the challenges, but actually you've got an amazing team around you and they're the ones who are going to help you out. So it's through that content marketing that you can actually get that authenticity.
Cool. So that's given you a bit of an introduction to our panellists. Now I wanted to ask if there were any specific areas, topics that anyone wanted to cover. I mean, I don't know a lot about the people who are here today with your particular interests or issues, but has anyone got any thoughts on what they've heard so far? Thank you.
My pleasure. I don't have any thoughts on what I've got so far. It's all fascinating. I'd just like to pick up a point there about that authenticity piece and how you leverage support and sponsorship internally. So in that particular example you just cited, there was no additional work, people just going to the site, closing into the site. But do you guys in the prison service do any kind of proactive engagement of employees to try and get that kind of support and ambassadorship? And the reason I ask this is, so I work for Accenture, that's one of our biggest challenges, is how do we take everyone on that journey, to use such a horrible phrase?
Yeah, no, I mean, we do definitely. So the campaign, as Chris said, is it in you to be a prison officer? So it's very much about the aspiration. Do you have this courage? Do you have these communication skills? Do you have the resilience? So that's the message that goes externally. But that message works equally well internally. So we've cleverly flipped it on the other side to say, it's in you. So courage, it's in you. Resilience, it's in you. So we're using this aspiration to say, these are the kind of people we want. Internally, we're saying, you've already got these amazing skills. You're already completely qualified for this. And actually, we're looking for more people to role model themselves on the great behaviors that you've got. So yeah, it's been really successful internally as well, because it is that kind of aspirational piece.
The challenge we have is around the use of social media. So organisationally, we actually discourage our staff from using it, because we've had a number of bad instances where it's gone wrong. There are a number of sites, there's a site called Know the Danger, there's prison staff talking about how grim it all is. So organisationally, we don't sort of look favourably on the use of social media. Stephanie and I have the challenge in our job of actually trying to maintain the pages, but it's all blocked off our system. So that's why we always walk around with our own IT to do it. But interestingly, our staff still ignore us, and they get out there and they tell people what a good job it is. I think that's the challenge.
And there is a huge amount of pride in working in the prison service as well, and it's going back to that campaign that we kind of remind them, and it's those stories that really resonate with people, and we got into this in the first place. It's not an easy job, but it's so kind of worthy and worthwhile.
I think when you end it that way, instead of just saying, well, we want to talk to you about what the day's like, is that actually focus it on, why is this so important to you? Actually, that's just good interviewing. And actually, I think then people feel they're opened up as opposed to feeling they're doing something more scripted. I think also there's a challenge, especially with social media, about as soon as anything comes along, corporations love to put policies on it. And actually, with social media, you have a social media policy. I think straight away what employees think is all about what I mustn't do. So we're doing more and more, we've been doing this over the last few years, more and more playbooks, social media playbooks, to give people the guidance on how they can get involved and how they can rebrand their own social media presence, but what other things they can do to kind of share their own story, because that's a big part of employer brand. And I think the only way employer brand really gets to resonate with the audience and really gets interaction is when employees get involved. So things like moving more away from policy and more towards kind of playbook type approach, I think is a good thing to do, because then people feel they can get more involved in the process.
Yeah, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. Like sometimes you need the policy to create a framework, but you can also have that and encourage the playbook approach. I would agree. It's important.
Chris, do you want to say a little bit more there about what you mean by a playbook and how you actually get them to work? Because presumably it's all very well in theory to say we're going to do this and we're going to get employees involved.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's never good to have a blank page and you're thinking, so I know that content marketing is important, but what on earth do I do? And typically with a kind of a playbook approach, it can be as big as or as small as you want. And so there's some simple things that can be done over, say, 4 weeks, which are kind of a 4-point plan, which is, one thing is to actually sit down and plan the content, create the content, repurpose it, publish it, and promote it, and then analyse it. So I think, and it sounds so obvious saying it, but it's when you're planning it, you really need to think about what the audience wants. And that's not just in the case of, well, this is the job spec, and this is what someone's going to want from that kind of role. It's actually, if they are an apprentice or they're a graduate, they may have some challenges that they need solved, and actually you as a recruiter can play a role in actually solving those challenges. So actually, what content can we put amongst we have job opportunities for you amongst that? From an experienced hire perspective, actually that planning of content could be, well, actually there's this thing about wanting to encourage people to share their own expertise. So actually there's a thing about repurposing maybe existing content that marketing already have and giving it a bit of a career angle. So actually people, when they see your content, actually they want to get involved in that conversation around something around thought leadership. And then when it comes to creating that content, it doesn't always have to be from scratch. I think certainly when you're piloting, actually take something that already exists, use that in an editorial plan, and see how it works. And that gives you a starting point to see if something does perform well. And I think the promotion thing is important. And I think Facebook's a nice starting point because it's actually very cost effective. And the targeting is so granular. Is actually make sure if you're creating that content, just promote it to the right people. And then just spend a bit of time analysing it. Now that 4-point process can be done over 4 weeks. And actually that can include maybe 2, 4, 6, 8 pieces of content over 4 weeks. Try that methodology and apply it. Because as much as there's stats out there that you can show to your key stakeholders that this is something that should be done, they're never going to invest in it as much as you may want them to. So actually taking that step-by-step approach and going, right, we piloted something, we didn't put all our chips on black and gamble on this. We put a bit of budget on this particular pilot, and look at the uplift in referrals to social referrals to our website. Look at the amount of engagement we had. Actually, we've tracked the application, the job opportunity posts to the ATS. So actually look how many applications we actually received from this. And when someone looks at that, they'll go, yeah, I think there's something in that, and I think it's maybe worth pushing this out a bit further. So I think you can start out quite simply.
Is there, when we've heard any other points that anyone wants to raise at the moment? Okay, well, yeah, no. There is something I did want to pick up on, which is this. One of the things you said earlier, Paul, was that I think you talked about a campaign where it's going to take 6 to 10 years to work.
The Barclays Coca-Cola.
Yeah, and when you hear that kind of thing, you think, well, okay, that's great. It's great for marketing companies such as ourselves to go to clients and say, well, we've got this idea. 6 to 10 years, you're going to get some results out of it, invest some big money in it, and we'll tell you about it in 10 years' time. It did make me wonder about this whole thing about measurement and, you know, long-term versus short-term. I mean, where's the proof that this kind of stuff actually works?
Well, I think it's the same as if you put a billboard out in the street or advertise on the tube, you're going to struggle to get sort of any proof of that. You kind of it's a very tough one to prove through analytics, other than sort of checking through Google Analytics and looking at sort of web uplifts when campaigns go live is probably, I think, the closest thing you can possibly do. But I think overall in recruitment, and I work a lot with universities, and they become absolutely obsessed with CPA metrics, and everything is analysed on last click, last view, because there's no full attribution model in place. So what you have is, in the recruitment space, it's job boards. In the education space, I see it with programmatic retargeting. They're fulfilling their jobs. They're designed to convert. That's what they do. So programmatic retargeting, it's performance media. It's designed to get conversions. Job boards, it's designed to funnel people through to applications. That's their piece. But as we've got more and more analytics in place, whether initially sort of through Google Analytics, more so through things like Bid Manager, DCM, you can see a lot more of the picture, but not the full picture, because as far as I currently know, there's nothing that really looks back to actually attribute sort of whether it's purchase, if it's a brand, if it's a sort of consumer purchase or job application, then looks back across the entire cycle for all the various touch points that someone has been through that's influenced their buying decision or their recruitment decision. So yeah, it's from my view anyway, currently sort of not possible to do, and you sort of have to do it on gut and intuition, that putting everything into what's at the very bottom of that funnel is probably a false economy. If you look at the stats and all you go on based on a Excel spreadsheet put in front of you saying X job board is getting me all these applications, if that's all you see, the picture, then you probably think that's where all my budget should go. But that's where the false economy lies, because what you're ignoring is everything else is driving that into doing. However, tough to prove.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the history and how brands put themselves out there, you will see that most brands that have been persistent in advertising themselves, then they were in the game for the long run. So what I would say if I had a boss who would tell me, well, just put all the money on that job board. So are you in for the short term or are you in for the long term? Yes, to your question, there isn't way that we can tangibly prove that campaign has worked. But if you look at how brands, or big brands, or even small brands, have worked in history, they've always been persistent in advertising themselves and being always out there, and then that has paid off. If you look out for, well, 20 years later, then you know, they've got a lot of money.
Sorry, I think for us in government, we want, in this context, we have the advantage because we've actually got long-term plans. So we know we're going to be opening prisons in 2020. And so the content that we're pushing out now to young people, 16, 17-year-olds who are making choices about, or thinking about subjects to inform careers, they're going to be our target audience in 4 or 5 years' time. So I think it is, how do you measure it? I don't think we will ever be able to have a quantifiable measure, but actually we know those people where they are at the moment and where we want them to be in sort of 4 or 5 years' time.
It kind of goes back to what Chris was saying as well about the passive job seekers. That's kind of who we're after. We want to make sure that we're on their radar, and we want to make sure that the story that they've got about us is the one that we want them to understand.
Yeah, I think so. If you're, let's say, having values-based interviews or sort of selection criteria, that's where sort of content can play a big role, but also you can probably monitor quite easily. I think you probably see this a bit more sort of with millennials and their how they choose sort of which career path to go down. So I think there's the PwC has something on the site that around sort of 45% of young people will choose to work for a brand who is ethically aligned with them. Although interestingly, when it starts to rank out, the most important thing is progression. and a clear career path. But that's also something that sort of can be communicated through content. But back to that values piece, if you're having a piece of content or a series of content that's putting across your values and humanizing you as a recruiter or as a brand, and you know that you want people who align with your values, then when it comes to that interview stage, you can monitor it back against, are the people coming through aligning closer with my values than they previously did in the past.
I think there's going to be a lot more focus on kind of editorial planning, really. Yes, you have your job vacancies, but actually that's really just the tip of the iceberg. But actually, you're going to have it and say, right, we've got our vacancies, that's fine. But actually, what are the pain points of our audience? Or what are they interested in? What gets them really excited or inspired? And then coming up with content that actually is aligned with that. Because it's like with anything really, you rarely go into a party and go into that group right over there and just say, hi guys, I'm here. Are you interested in this? They'll probably look at you going, that's a bit odd. But actually you start to build a relationship with someone and another person, and actually you build some sort of rapport. And I think brands have always been about that, but I think particularly now is that importance of building that rapport with someone. Take a personal example, I'm expecting soon, my other brands will probably buy from. And actually, they're probably hoping that actually we probably buy from them over the next few years. That thing of really understanding who the audience is and what we can give them is actually just good kind of journalistic, editorial kind of mindset. I think there's going to be more and more people in the recruitment industry focused on doing that.
That's really interesting, actually. So the idea of brands or recruiters being helpful or useful. This is an example from a university that sort of worked with in the past. But there's a lot that sort of recruiters can learn from universities, because they recruit at a mass level, and likewise actually universities can learn from recruiters. But pretty much every year around January, February is when the first round of big nursing interviews take place at universities. And these 17, 18-year-olds who have never been to an interview in their life, and they are terrified. They have no idea what to do at all. So we worked with the University of Bedfordshire, quite a heavy recruiting university, and there's no sort of mention of themselves. All they wanted to do was put some great content out there to help people who are going through this quite challenging time to become better at interviews. And it's just a really nice piece of content that's helpful for the wider community on the student room, but also had a real positive brand impact on the university as well. So yeah, that being helpful, it's a good way to work.
And that's why people are on the student room, aren't they? It's because actually they're wanting to talk amongst themselves and get advice. So actually that approach makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah,
that peer-to-peer advice is pretty much exactly sort of why the site exists, and it's kind of enriched when recruiters or universities do get involved, because particularly on more complex matters that students aren't always going to have the answer, or they're going to have the wrong answer. So sometimes sort of a university or recruiter coming in and saying, actually, these are the facts, this is how the process works, this is how you can get the best out of our recruitment process, our interview process, yada yada yada. It enriches the site in a really big way.
I imagine the schools help like that as well, because they probably talk to their students a lot, going, this is the way you should do things, this is what you should consider, and they'll go, yeah, but when a university says it,
yeah.
So it's a bit like with career services. I used to do a lot of work with career services, and same thing, careers advisors giving advice to students, but when they hear it from employers directly, it's like, oh yeah, absolutely, that makes sense.
Yeah, you get that kind of classic, whether it's TSR or Facebook or any other sort of social platform, you get this kind of sort of snowball effect where one person gets educated on what is the right answer, then they can then spread that correct answer to sort of a much wider audience, and then you just end up with a much better informed audience, which is kind of what everyone wants to achieve.
I think that's what we find through our Facebook pages. So we have quite a complex assessment process. So it's not only sort of a fitness test, but some sort of literacy and numeracy testing, and then some role play through simulations. That's the thing that really spooks the people, and you find a lot of the questions are around, so what are the simulations really like? What's it like? Are you nervous? do they shout at you? And it's that chatter that then goes on that I think gives people the confidence when they go into the process. And if we try to put that message out, well, of course we say we don't shout at you and you'll be fine, but actually hearing it from other candidates and people who've been through the process, I think actually drives them to actually attend.
How did you find that move actually from, I suppose, going from saying, well, okay, we need to go out on job boards and absolutely need to be putting vacancies in front of people and raising awareness, to moving towards that more kind of content marketing approach? How was that for you guys getting that?
Well, culturally, it was totally alien to us. So we've got lots of prisons out there and management teams who are now saying, we never see your adverts. I look in the local paper and we never see anything. Therefore, you're not doing anything. And some of your targeted, you talk about online material, it's never reached us. And it's actually then about going out and explaining to people, but actually, you already work for us. So why do we want to spend money and provide content for people who already work for us? This is about attracting new people into our business. So culturally, it's been really difficult to get that message over. I was on a conversation with some senior HR practitioners a couple of weeks ago. He said, but I've never seen anything on Facebook. I'm not even on Facebook and I haven't seen it. And it was, so culturally, we've got a long way to go before we get people into the right place.
I think once, I've seen kind of examples of when we went to an assessment centre for prison officer recruitment, and talking to the assessors and them saying, well, if they don't pass the fitness test, they don't get through. That's it. They're taking the day off work or something. They spent the train journey down to get here, but if they don't pass the fitness test, then goodbye. And it's like, well, tell you what, how about we take that 13-week plan that you've got in your hand, not give it to them after they've failed it, but let's actually see how we take that and actually give it to them beforehand. So 13 weeks beforehand, perhaps actually they start going up the steps, getting off the bus stop a bit earlier. So it's that kind of, I think that kind of approach has already helped, because it made people see, it's like, okay, well, we need that. We need people to get past these stages of the process. Right, so if we do it that way, that's going to help later on down the line.
Yeah, we had and we did a similar sort of thing with so these simulations that Chris was talking about. So you have to, as part of the assessment, you go into a room and you are presented with an offender or a lawyer or someone who's got an issue, and you have no idea what they're going to talk about, but you need to work through and speak to them and try and solve their problem. And that is a really big, scary thing as part of the recruitment process. So we created an interactive video that has an offender, face on in the camera, saying, I've got these problems. What are you going to do to help me? And then it's an ABC sort of test, and you go through, and you can do this kind of practice thing so that you get the idea of what it's actually like to be in that situation. Not just for the assessment, part of the assessment, but also, again, what this job is actually like, and do you actually have the qualities that it takes to be successful. And one of the big things that we've worked really hard to do, controversially, is to have fewer applicants, because it's quite expensive for them to go through the process. So we want people who have actually asked themselves, is this job really right for me? And then to discount themselves if they're not going to be, and then we get fewer but better applicants. And that has been a success.
Actually, that video that sat on the website, what we did was we took one of those scenarios, quick edits, and this is a kind of talking around the thing of repurposing existing content. We took it, we posted it on Facebook. I think it was £175 ad spend, and it got seen by over 60,000 people. It got interacted with, I think over 12,000 times, social interaction 12,000 times. So that's the thing about it. I think you have content, lots of organisations have content already, and it's just about kind of repurposing it, because I just think it's a shame when time and effort is put into creating something, whether it's a website, a video, anything, and you then see how many people go to it or view it. It's not as much as it should be. It needs to be heard by people, seen by other people.
Yeah, this is with university again, but the news section of universities' web pages is basically the graveyard of great content. It's put there, and some of it is fantastic, but no one knows the URL. No one's has terrible SEO, no one ever finds it, but it's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And if you find a way of repurposing that sort of for different audiences and boost it out through social, it already exists. Just get it out there.
The universities, you know, have, like any organisation, they sit on such interesting content that will be of interest to the people they're wanting to target. So repurposing it is definitely a nice first step, that's for sure.
One of the questions I did want to ask is that you talked about the prison service and the content you've generated and how it's been very helpful to people in the application process. And I can see there's a difference perhaps between that kind of content, which is helpful to people when they've actually made the decision to some extent to investigate you as an employer, and the more general stuff that you were talking about, Chris, in terms of like when you were referencing your potential child. Not even a potential child. And one of the things I was thinking there is that, okay, people are rational human beings, presumably, and when they've got content that's useful to something they've made a decision on, of course they're going to engage in it. But surely, Chris, when they're looking more generally, people get that kind of content you were talking about, they get that, it's useful, but when they actually come to make a decision, aren't they going to make a different rational decision and start the decision process all over again? So in that sense, what is the point of content marketing? Aren't you helping competitors potentially?
I suppose, I mean, I think in the long term, it's definitely a long game. We're actually not going to necessarily see huge returns overnight, but it's about ingratiating yourself with individuals, and I think by being in front of them relevantly on a regular basis, then when they do get to that point of right, okay, I'm now in a mindset to maybe look for a job, I think there is definitely an increased chance in them actually seeing that. I think that LinkedIn stat from the Global Recruitment Report 2016, which is 66% of people surveyed basically knew about the organisation before they actually applied. And it goes back to the reason why I think many of us get into the industry, and certainly why I got into the industry, is that actually getting people to make the right decision in terms of the universities they choose or the careers that they take are really, really important, and that can't be done by a job vacancy alone. So in the same way that Marriott Hotels want to help people have a great travel experience, yes, to sell hotel rooms, but if they do that, then if you do it like Marriott have done, then actually you will see more uplift from people actually coming to go to your website.
And the point about competitors as well, that's a good point. If competitors are doing it, so you may be feeding them well, but if you're not there, then actually your competitors will be there talking about giving advice and all that, and you will not be there. So actually you are decreasing chances to be chosen amongst all the competitors. So again, then it goes back to the quality of content that you come up with, which is vital. And what we were saying before about having this content and making the most out of it. I think the example that you've done with the video, just taking that 10-20 seconds out of it and then repurposing on social media.
It's also about the quality of candidates as well, as opposed to just the sort of a volume game. So I think something came out of the AGR maybe last year or 2 years ago. That apparently geographers make sort of like the mindset journey of someone who, from GCSE age, wants to be an accountant. They'll decide to study maths, decide to study physics. They'll study accountancy at university, and then they'll look at a sort of a big four accounting firm. They already have that journey mapped out. So you don't really, so for those guys, you don't need to actually serve them that much sort of content because they already kind of know where they're going to go. It's those people who did maths, physics, geography at A-level, who then studied a geography degree, who, because of their attributes, actually make very good accountants. They're the people you need to convince this is why you should choose to have a career in accountancy, and that's where sort of content needs to come into it because it's playing on sort of values, it's humanizing sort of a brand as to why I should choose to work for you as opposed to carrying on something to do with geography. And you're not going to get, once again, you're not going to get that through a job posting. So it's recognizing sort of where the different audiences lie. So those who have a clear path, they know exactly what they want. Do you need to serve the content? Yeah, probably not. You can appreciate the converted, but it's those you need to convince to take up your sector and then B, you as an actual employer. That's where it plays a part.
Lloyd's banking groups, Lloyd's banking groups, a good example. They've got their Discover What Matters website. What they've done is they've looked at people's skills, saying, well, what kind of person are you? And what they've done is they've built content around that. It's not necessarily their own content, but third-party content. So I really like that. Approach, because what Lloyd's banking group has done is they've got, we understand that actually people know what their skills are, perhaps, but they don't necessarily see how they align to a particular area of business. So that's a really nice example. We'll be sending over kind of after this up an email of links to stats and case studies afterwards. But I think that's a nice example.
I think in government it's sort of less of an issue. So there is a private sector out there of prisons and people who deliver court services. So it's in the same sector. And actually, organisationally, the Ministry of Justice has to keep people secure and has to reduce reoffending. Some of that is delivered through us in the public sector, but equally it's delivered by private sector partners. So as long as those private sector partners are getting good quality people, actually us as the general public will get the benefit. So I think we're probably unique in that context, that we don't see competition as being a threat. And if our content helps them recruit good quality people, then we're all for it. Where it doesn't work, so people may have seen the Panorama documentary on Medway, which was run by G4S, where they've lost that contract and we've gone in to run it. It actually shows the danger of us not helping the private sector recruit the right people to do the job.
Before I ask my next question, is there any points people want to raise at this stage? Feel free to buy in at any time. But I do have a question about, I see a lot of organisations generate a lot of content. And one of the things that's in the back of my mind is that people talk a lot about employer branding and the importance of having clear employer brand messaging. How do you relate content marketing to employer branding? Because sometimes it feels to me that the two aren't related and that people are just going, blah, here's loads of content.
I think often employer branding can be too much focus on, well, I suppose if you ask many organisations what is their employer brand, they'll have the research, they'll have a proposition, but then it's like, okay, well, let's see that out in the wild, let's look at that employer brand. And actually there's the kind of manifestation of the actual employer brand is through employee profiles on a website, maybe bandstands in a foyer, posters, etc., or ads that are run. I think content marketing gives us opportunities to go, right, well actually, let's look at gathering together these employee stories. Actually not necessarily employee stories in terms of the typical transactional employee profile. No day is the same. Kind of lights, camera, action type content, I don't know how to call it. But it's actually going, well, let's look at our brand pillars. Usually companies have 4 brand pillars, 5 brand pillars, sometimes less, sometimes more. And it's like, well, let's take those brand pillars and have them as a kind of editorial guidance. So we're doing something with the clients at the moment where actually one of their brand pillars is stimulating and challenging. And we've got great content from employees, not talking actually about their job, but talking about the fact that one person is a violinist and they went to Germany and was part of an orchestra. Just as if you could talk to an employee and spend a few minutes with them to get a real insight into the organisation and the character of the organisation, that kind of approach I think really helps that. And you look at, especially looking at millennials and Generation Z, the Endowment Trust report comes out every year. So trust is really important, and actually trust through your employees or hearing from your employees is a big part of that.
I think the more we talk, the more the concept of personalisation becomes quite apparent and quite important. I think the argument is, well, that's why job boards work, but it's not all about that, because you cannot do any kind of personalisation through job boards. That's just the last touch point. Everything that's behind it before that, that's just massive news, and that drives obviously the candidates to the job boards. But that, if I was in HR, if I was a recruiter, that's the argument I would bring to my to my boss, I would say, well, you can see job roles and the stats coming from there, but you can't see all that's coming before that, all the kind of talk and trust that you just said, which I think is a huge part.
Yeah. Basically, if you strip away the jargon, employer brand is just brand, and content marketing is just a way of deploying that brand. There's many other ways of doing it. It's just a great way of, in my view anyway, of getting more detailed information about your brand out there. Yeah, it's just a way of extending your brand to a wider audience. But to strip back.
You mentioned trust there. Do you think generally employees can be trusted with content? I mean, why do people use agencies or edit the content of their employees? Because as we said, employees do generate great content.
Well, I think there's in any organisation, I suppose it's about finding the time to actually find those people. But in any organisation, you're going to find a good chunk of those people who actually, represent your brand, and if they talk about you, that actually they're going to be absolutely right for you. I suppose it is about trusting employees as well. You look at IHG, and they've got staff all over hotels across the globe. And life at IHG has been trending for a long time. Lots of people involved in that. What they've done is they've actually gone, we trust our employees to go out and do that. So I suppose there's a mixture of kind of user-generated content and opening it out onto the world of social, and then kind of more editorially controlled content.
Yeah, you kind of have to have that trust, and so enforcing social media lockdowns it's going to lead you to a dead end, because I think you've got to just trust your employees to have their opinion. That could be positive, that could be negative, but it's going to get out there come what may. If it doesn't go out there on Facebook, they'll have the conversation through Snapchat. So I think the easiest way is to have trusting employees, and if something does blow in your face, just have the tools in place to be able to manage that.
And you learn from it as well, don't you?
Yeah. And it works both ways as well. So if you've got your trust in those employees, that trust is reciprocated by those potential candidates who know they're having an authentic conversation with someone. So it's not quite the same thing, but we've done a lot of conversations with current employees. So their videos, their voice, their audio videos, I guess, with images, about people talking about what it's actually like to work in a prison service. And we're looking at doing that same sort of thing with vendors as well, to actually say that, because our big message is it's about rehabilitation, and prison officers have the power to change these people's lives. So why not speak to the people who are actually in prison, who are having these interactions with prison officers? So I think for us it shows that we trust our employees to the extent that actually the people in their care are being featured on Facebook and other outlets as well, to tell their story.
We got Emirates to talk to their employees when he came to recruiting pilots. That was quite interesting, and they came up with this video about pilots talking about their experience. So before going to Emirates, and there was this guy saying, well, I used to live in India, I think, and he saw the advert, and then he was called for the first interview, and how excited he was when actually he went for the first interview, and then the second one, and then when he was hired, he was just saying how happy he was, and you can see from the video how his eyes are shining. You're like, wow, he must love Emirates, then I love Emirates. I think that's really powerful, and to answer your question, if you use it in the smart way, if you use your employees in the smart way, then you can get so much out of it, as opposed to hiring some actors to kind of talk about your company.
Yeah, you definitely want to sort of build brand advocates in-house to put that positive message across. But I don't think you want to sanitize the negative, because it's like if you go on Glassdoor or TripAdvisor and everything is just 5-star reviews, you know it's bullshit. So yeah, and I think you can see that on social media as well. If you jump in there and it's just full of sort of shiny, happy people. I always think of this, sorry to relate back to universities, University of Manchester, their prospectus is always incredibly multicultural with a shining blue sky. there's never a shining blue sky in Manchester. It doesn't happen. So, but people see through that. So you can't sanitize social. You just people see through it.
The other thing is that we just got carried away recently with some marketing content for some support grades in one of our high security prisons, and we're really challenging the staff there to say, come forward and actually talk about your role and how it is, because we want to feature it in the local newspaper as an editorial. But actually when we stopped and did the sanity check, if you're working with the most dangerous offenders in the UK, you don't want your picture in the fact that you're doing that all across the newspaper. So we've had to find other ways of doing it, but so you just need to sort of sometimes just stop and check.
You guys obviously, I mean, all agree it's fantastic to have both great corporate content and an amazing USG, right? But do you have any examples of companies who got the USG right, who nailed it? And not just the leaders, right? Because if I look on Facebook, LinkedIn, typically the people who share content are either HR recruiters or senior managers. So their credibility and authenticity is really not there, because in the end they are part of the corporate. And I struggle to see good examples, shining examples out there where they have across all boards, across graduates, across entry level, across retail employees, authentic. This is how it's like to work here, and this is not bullshit. To your point. So who's doing it?
So I personally have seen it. I think the Army do it very well. I think they've always been sort of a great example of it, but they have a lot of budget to be able to throw at the problem as well, which helps. Sort of the National Apprenticeship Service, they've done quite a lot, but they also have to, just because of sort of the preconceptions that need to be sort of addressed around apprenticeships. So that they need to take that sort of very much content-led approach, where it's interviews with real people talking about their real circumstances. And if you look at sort of their websites or anything creative they produce, whether it's sort of pre-rolls on 4OD or whatever, it's all about sort of the individual and their experiences.
It's still curated, so I'm looking for companies that have that nice balance between maybe less curated and more, proper user-generated.
I think
Who feel like it's in me. I love this company so much. I'm going to go out there today and tell everybody how amazing this work is.
I think actually national apprenticeships, that a couple of years ago, they actually they're still doing it, centering around the individuals, but actually they had Twitter accounts for those individuals. So there was a launch campaign which had maybe a bit more gloss to it, but actually then those individual Twitter accounts from those individuals were then publishing content themselves and having conversations with you. So I think that's a nice example. I don't think there's a huge amount out there, but I mean, if you look at L'Oreal, Life at L'Oreal, you look at that hashtag, you see there's plenty of authentic content there. Life at IHG, again, that's a hashtag that has plenty. Yeah, IHG, has plenty of content out there.
Also, so authentic content doesn't necessarily need to be sort of a single employee kind of going rogue and putting lots of content up on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. It could be coming from the brand in what could be sort of a kind of slightly sanitized way, but actually really being about what your organization is about. So, if you genuinely are interested in enhancing the world, sort of saving the environment, whatever, that needs to come across in a very genuine way. Vice versa, actually, if you are very focused on, you come into this role because you just want to make a shed load of cash, then you have to say that as well. Yeah. Like, don't lie about it. And that authenticity doesn't have to, like I said, doesn't have to come from an employee going out there and doing it by themselves. It can come from the marketing team or the HR team. It just needs to be genuinely authentic to what your brand is.
Actually, with recruiting noms and recruiting prison officers, actually, we've got some on the Facebook page video content that actually is audio with reportage footage on it. So actually, getting a couple of prison officers to actually talk amongst themselves, you actually get some really, by having it less directed and having people just talking, you get some really genuine responses out of people saying, when I heard that noise of the bars closing behind me, I was really, really scared. I was like, what did I put myself in for? What have I got myself into? So Noms is a nice example of that as well, I think if you generally look at anything live at, if you start to type into Twitter, hashtag live at, you start to see a number of things. Live at does give you quite a bit of nice employee generated content.
Not to mention Facebook and Google, but obviously I'm talking but
exactly.
they just know, so
Yeah.
just know what you're going to go for.
Yeah.
Just like
But it does make me think, Chris, about sort of, future steps, and probably by the question, that there are plenty of feeds out there on Twitter and other social media from prisoner associations, and perhaps we need to be tapping into that because there's criticism there, and but organisationally we're big enough to take it. So. And it just gives that more balanced view. So people think, well, they will say that because they're employees and it's HR who's pushing the feed out. Believe it or not, there is a trade union for prisoners.
Actually, those people are going to be very, very keen to get involved. And get involved is a very strong message, isn't it?
It's not really going to have an impact. But what is your view on that?
I think you can approach it from a couple different ways. I think that you can't get away from it. Reading a post is not the same as watching a video, and it is much easier to interact with a video. But as Chris was saying, we do, to get that more authentic content, we do have sort of videos that aren't really videos. It's an audio of a bunch of prison officers sitting around talking about sort of the more mundane bits of their life. And those are incredibly effective. I think video definitely has its place. I think it can't be a standalone, but we've used it really successfully, and it does just it gives that view of prisons that people won't be aware of and won't see.
Actually, we can send the report after this, but Cisco, I think it's 2 years' time, 80% of the world's web traffic will be focused around video. Hugely important. Facebook, one of the reasons they're still succeeding is because they realise actually their mobile and video is a big part of their business, and we find that video increases reach, increases engagement on social a lot more than the flatter content. And again, we can share this with you after this. Google did some research recently where they looked at the kind of video consumption behaviours of millennials with Generation Z and younger audiences. They didn't mind the 30-second spots for the highly polished content, but actually when it came to recall, they liked actually someone as if they've got a camera and just talking in front of that camera without any kind of script as such. They preferred that a lot more than the older generation. So I think video is a huge consideration. I think any in-house team needs to have at least one video production person who can actually go out and source video content, because Cisco says it's going to be 80% of the marketeer's job in the future, very soon as well.
So Chris, just on that point, what new platforms do we need to be thinking about or challenging you to actually say this is where we want to be in the future?
I think when it comes to video, I think YouTube's always got a role to play. But I think when you look at live video in particular, I think you've got Facebook. Facebook are kind of really annoying because they're still there and they're still developing. It's like Facebook are doing new things, so therefore there's still always a consideration. But then you look at Periscope, live video content from Periscope. I think Twitter in part are kind of hoping that Periscope are going to be one of their saving graces. Actually, so I think things like Periscope and that live video content is really, really important. But I think it's not just about channels, it's about format as well. Buy a 360 camera, put it in the middle of somewhere, and actually shoot something, and then that goes onto a platform. Again, sorry, Facebook, but I can then look at that photo or that video on Facebook and just look around that area using a 360 video camera. So I think 360 video is, would be the first person to say 360 video could be a big thing, but I think anything immersive is really, really important. I think live video content gives that to you, and things like 360 video and 360 photography really gives that to you as well. I mean, when I was first kind of getting into Twitter in like 2008, was a closing ceremony in Beijing, and a BBC reporter, I was following his Twitter feed, and he said, "It's amazing, I'm in the centre of the bird's nest at the closing ceremony." And I thought I was there, I felt like I was there. And you talk about 360 video and live video, that is very much putting you in the shoes of the individual, more so than that BBC reporter did in Beijing in 2008, something like ages ago.
It'll be interesting to see where VR takes that as well.
Yeah.
As that gets more and more adopted. I mean, augmented reality was kind of meant to do it, but it was a bit of a flop.
Yeah.
But VR, I think, particularly because Facebook, with their purchase of Oculus Rift,
Yeah.
they'll throw their mic behind it and it will become a thing. And that'll sort of be amazing recruitment.
And that's really important, isn't it? Because that's what the employee profile does. Someone talking about a picture of them, going, "My name is so-and-so, and this is my life at this organisation." That's trying to give some sort of immersive experience. And 360 video, VR and AR is doing that to the absolute nth degree.
Is there a question from the audience?
It was about video, actually. It's kind of just a conversation about some different channels and technology. So my question was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but if Cisco predict that video will be 80% of web traffic, is there an argument, I agree it should be balanced, and part of sort of your overall armoury, but is there an argument actually that stuff like old-fashioned words and blogs and podcasts and stuff like that might actually have a novelty value that we should leverage on that basis?
Well, actually, even with the video, now that I think it's 85% of video on Facebook is seen without the sound on. So actually, copy is becoming really important. I've seen on LinkedIn kind of discussions amongst copywriters saying, "Well, wait a minute, this isn't the rebirth of copywriting. It's always been around." But actually, that challenge of video not only being a visually appealing thing, but actually something you can read is really, really interesting. So I think yeah, but it's hard to say as well because things are changing so quickly. Who would have thought 12 months ago that you'd have to put captioning on your video to perform the best on Facebook?
Yeah, I think there'll always be a sort of a place for things that are tangible. And I guess it all depends on the audience. So having a one-size-fits-all approach, whether it's content or video or anything, isn't going to fit. Interesting point about sort of recall around millennials with sort of 5-second videos. That's kind of that right approach. Sorry, for that audience. Well, an old audience might want something differently. Well, if you're looking for very senior hires, probably you still want to be going down the. It's still, I'd argue, content marketing, but that prospect pack that could be physically sent out to someone, because different audiences respond to content in different ways. So yeah, it's not that one-size-fits-all approach. It's understanding your audience a lot more.
I think sometimes marketeers like to think, okay, there's one thing that's going to solve all my problems.
Yeah,
and if only it was that simple, if it was, probably wouldn't have jobs to be honest. But it's like you look at Waitrose, they are investing lots and lots of time, effort, and money in the Waitrose weekend newspaper. It's print. There's still absolutely a role to play, but they will be doing activity in terms of video content that's encouraging people to actually pick that up and gain more of their attention for a long time.
Okay, so we're almost out of time, I think. Is there any? I've got one more question, but is there any points anyone wanted to raise? Okay, well, my final question is, I guess we've heard a lot about content. We've heard a little bit about advertising, but going forward, is content all you need to do? What is the role of other things? Or is it just about content?
No. Just a short answer, no. It's part of the mix, and like I said earlier, it reminds me so much of when sort of mobile was the thing, or social media was the thing, and every single sort of brand or spend dollar or pound is going to go into social media. It didn't happen, and it's the same with content. It's just another pillar. It's just another sort of way of being able to reach out to an audience. So that, in my mind, is that funnel. It sits at the very, very top, and then you have your sort of your various other touch points, whether that's sort of display, email, all the way down to the job on the bottom.
I think content is at the core. Content, I wouldn't see that as a pillar. I would see that as the core of everything. If you've got concept, a creative concept, then you can cascade that across all your media. So if you've got a very strong idea, strong identity, then that's going to affect everything. All the media that you're going to use, your content will be there. So I think, it will be there. It's always been there, really. And will continue to be there, because without identity, without valued, without content, there's nothing.
I think the bit still, we still need to do the research though every time.
Yeah.
So we just been doing some work about some recruitment to prisons in really isolated places. And at the end of the day, the research tells us that one of the tools we need to deploy is the little postcard in the newsagent's window, because that will be the most effective way to get some of the people into there. So how we present that and brand will be important, but actually the content, to a lesser degree, it still goes back to the old-fashioned card.
And then things like events as well. Events are, as much as maybe technology can give you that face-to-face feel, actually getting to an event is still an absolutely great way of engaging with people, just having conversation with people. But it's one part of a much bigger mix.
You could probably argue that experiential is content. Is it in real time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I would agree that content is absolutely the core, and it's what lets us sell our brand and our proposition and what it is that we're trying to do, not just to potential candidates, but also to internal staff as well. And it's really important that everyone kind of understands that they're there for a single purpose. So, yeah, I think we won't be getting away from that anytime soon.
Thank you very much. So, with that advertised, if there are no other questions, thank you very much for coming. And as Chris said, if you want to pick up on any of the points, Chris has got a lot of information he can give.
Thank you.